Have you ever wondered why some women carry a silent ache they can't quite name, a heaviness that lingers even in moments that should feel light? Beneath their successes, their resilience, and their sharp intuition lies a hidden truth. They are grieving someone they never got to meet. Not a lost friend, not a former lover, but the version of themselves who never had the chance to grow, to breathe, to live without fear. That inner child. The girl who once looked at the world with unguarded eyes and believed she was worthy, simply because she existed. She is gone, or so it seems, and what remains is the shadow of who she might have been. When a woman's inner child is wounded, she learns early that love must be earned, that her value is conditional, that her voice should be softer or not heard at all. She grows into a master at adapting, becoming what others need, molding herself into the shape that will offend the least, please the most, and secure the smallest scraps of safety. But with each compromise, the authentic self fades further. The girl inside waits quietly for the day she will be chosen, not by the world, but by the woman she became. The grief of the inner child is unlike any other. It is grief for a future that never arrived, for a self who was never allowed to stand in the sun. This grief is confusing because nothing tangible was taken. There is no funeral, no photographs to cry over. The loss is invisible, yet it shapes everything. It whispers into relationships, into choices, into the way a woman holds herself when she enters a room. It can make her draw toward men who echo the same dynamics that once silenced her, because the familiar is mistaken for the safe. Jung taught that what we repress does not disappear. It moves underground into the unconscious, where it waits. The inner child lives there, carrying both the purest essence of the self and the deepest unmet needs. She is both treasure and wound, both light and the shadow cast when that light is blocked. Healing her requires more than affirmations and positive thinking. It requires grieving, truly allowing the heart to break for what was lost, and for what will never be recovered in the way it was originally meant to be. To grieve the inner child is to step into a paradox. On one hand, you must accept that she will never live the life she should have had. On the other, you must recognize that the woman you are now can give her something she never knew was possible. But this cannot happen until the grief is honored. If grief is ignored, the wound stays raw. It leaks into every interaction, making even love feel dangerous, making joy feel undeserved. The danger in skipping this morning is that a woman will try to fix the inner child through achievement, through being chosen by someone else, through perfecting her body, her career, her image. But no amount of external validation can bring back the girl who needed unconditional love when she was small. Without grief, the adult self becomes a performance, and the applause never reaches the place that is truly hungry. The work begins in silence, where there is no one to perform for. It is here that the woman must sit with the ache and name it for what it is: loss. Loss of innocence, loss of safety, loss of a sense that the world was meant to welcome her without conditions. This is where the tears that have been held back for decades finally fall, not because she is weak, but because she is strong enough to see the truth. And this truth is not cruel, it is clarifying. When you finally mourn the child you never got to be, you stop asking the present to rewrite the past. You stop looking for parents in your lovers or for saviors in your friends. You begin to see that no one is coming to give her what she needed. The only one who can stand for her now is you, the you who has survived, who has learned, who can finally choose differently. Yet the moment you decide to grieve, resistance will rise. The psyche fears this process because it feels like death, and in a way it is. It is the death of illusions, of the fantasy that if you just try harder, you can get the love you missed. It is the death of the role you played to survive. And death, in the symbolic sense, always precedes rebirth. Jung called this transformation individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond the masks and adaptations. Some women will turn away at this threshold, telling themselves that the past is past and there is no point in going back. But the inner child does not live in the past. She lives in the unconscious present. She speaks through patterns, through sudden waves of emotion, through the way your body tenses when someone raises their voice. If you ignore her, she will find other ways to be heard. The question is, when she calls, will you answer? Will you dare to feel the weight of what she lost, even if it breaks your heart? Because the heartbreak is not the end. It is the doorway, and beyond. It lies a self you have only glimpsed in dreams. A self who is no longer afraid to take up space, to speak, to live without apology. Grief for the inner child is not a single moment. It is a slow unfolding, a series of realizations that pierce through the defenses you built long ago. It begins when you recognize that the pain you carry did not start with the people who hurt you as an adult. It began much earlier, in rooms where your voice was too small to be heard, where your tears felt dangerous, where love came dressed in conditions you could never quite meet. This early pain became the blueprint, and without knowing it, you have been following its design ever since. Every bond you've formed, every compromise you've made, every boundary you've allowed to erode, it all ties back to the same original wound. The child inside you learned that her needs were too much, that her joy was inconvenient, that her curiosity was a threat. She learned to hide parts of herself to keep whatever love she could get. And so, she grew up in exile, even while living inside your own skin. To face this is to confront the people and situations you once defended, excused, or romanticized. The truth is often uncomfortable. You may find yourself realizing that those who shaped you were also shaped by their own wounds, unable to give what they never received. Understanding this does not erase the damage, nor does it mean you must reconcile. It simply clears the fog so you can see the story as it truly was, not the softened version you told yourself to survive. There is a strange kind of freedom in this clarity. You stop expecting the past to repay a debt it cannot repay. You stop waiting for the apology that will never arrive. And in that stopping, you make room for something else, the possibility of choosing a new pattern. But this choice requires dismantling what is familiar, and the familiar has always felt like home, no matter how much it hurt. The psyche resists change because it fears the unknown more than it fears suffering. Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden aspects of the self that are denied or disowned. The wounded child is part of this shadow, not because she is dark or wrong, but because she carries truths too painful to face. Healing demands that you bring her into the light, that you stop turning away when she appears in the form of old fears, self-sabotage, or misplaced loyalty. This is not a sentimental reunion. Meeting your inner child can feel like confronting a stranger. She may be angry at you for abandoning her. She may not trust you at all. And why should she? You have walked away from her countless times, silencing her voice when it threatened the image you needed to present to the world. If you want her trust, you must earn it, not with promises, but with presence. Presence means sitting with her rage without dismissing it. It means letting her grief spill out without telling her to be strong. It means hearing her say that she was lonely, that she was afraid, that she hated the way she had to pretend everything was fine. And instead of rushing to fix it or explain it away, you simply listen. You listen until she knows she is no longer alone in the silence. The paradox of this work is that the woman you are now must become the mother she never had. This is not about romanticizing the role of a parent, but about reclaiming the ability to provide safety, acceptance, and unconditional regard to yourself. When you give these to your inner child, you are not undoing the past. You are creating a present in which her voice matters, where her feelings are valid, where her existence is enough. And yet, even as you begin to nurture her, grief will remain. Because no matter how much you love her now, You cannot give her the childhood she deserved. You cannot make the world she was born into gentler or more just. This truth is heavy, but it is also the very thing that frees you from the endless cycle of trying to fix what cannot be fixed. There comes a moment in this journey when you realize that healing is not about erasing scars. It is about making them part of your story without letting them define its end. The inner child will always carry the memory of her wounds, but she no longer has to carry them alone. She has you now, and that changes everything. And so the question begins to shift. It is no longer, how do I become who I was meant to be? It becomes, what will I do now that I know the truth of who I am? This is the beginning of individuation, the point where grief becomes the soil for growth, and the woman who once lived in survival begins to live in choice. Choice is the quiet revolution that follows grief. When the mourning is deep enough, it breaks the invisible chains that kept you bound to the past. You no longer feel compelled to replay the same stories, to seek the same kind of love that once wounded you. Instead, you begin to feel a strange, unfamiliar space opening inside you, a space where old compulsions no longer dictate your next step. This space can feel unsettling at first. Without the familiar pull of pain, you might wonder who you are meant to be. In this space, the wounded child no longer drives your decisions from the shadows. She is no longer pulling you toward people who echo the voices that once told her she wasn't enough. But freedom from the past is not the same as knowing how to live in the present. This is where many women feel lost, because the absence of pain is not yet the presence of joy. Joy requires cultivation, and the soil for it is often rocky after years of survival. Jung believed that the self is a unifying force, constantly seeking balance between opposites, between the child and the adult, between vulnerability and strength, between the shadow and the light. When you heal the inner child, you do not erase her, you integrate her. She becomes a source of creativity, intuition, and vitality. Her grief becomes wisdom. Her innocence becomes courage. Her sensitivity becomes discernment. This is the alchemy of healing, turning what once broke you into the very thing that strengthens you. Yet integration is not a single act. It is a lifelong dialogue. Some days you will feel whole, as though the fractures in your soul have been smoothed over. Other days the old ache will return without warning. This is not failure. It is simply the truth that healing is cyclical. The inner child will call for you again and again, not because she is still broken, but because she is part of you. And each time you answer, the bond between you grows stronger. This bond changes the way you move through the world. You stop tolerating spaces that make her shrink. You stop engaging in relationships where she must perform to earn love. You start choosing with her in mind, protecting the parts of you that once had no protection. Decisions that used to feel impossible now become clear because you measure them against a new standard. Will this honor her? Will this make her feel safe? Will this allow her to breathe? There is a quiet power in living this way. It is not the power of dominance or control. It is the power of alignment. You are no longer divided against yourself. The girl you were and the woman you are stand side by side, each holding a piece of the same truth. And when you speak, your words carry the weight of someone who has lived through loss and still chosen to protect what is sacred. But here lies the next challenge. The world will not always celebrate your wholeness. People who benefited from your silence may resent your voice. Those who grew comfortable with your compliance may resist your boundaries. And some relationships will not survive the woman you are becoming. This, too, must be grieved, not because you have done something wrong, but because growth often requires letting go. Letting go is not cruelty. It is an act of fidelity to the self. The inner child has spent too many years adapting to environments that could not hold her. Now, the task is to build an environment where she can stay without fear. This may mean ending certain connections, walking away from certain opportunities, or simply refusing to explain yourself to those who cannot understand. The cost of protecting her is real, but so is the cost of losing her again. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson. You cannot save the girl you once were from every wound, but you can save her from being abandoned by the woman you are now. You can choose, again and again, to be the one who stays. And in that staying, something extraordinary happens. The grief that once felt like a weight becomes a kind of root, anchoring you, steadying you, making it impossible for the winds of the world to tear you from yourself. There comes a point when the grief softens. It does not vanish, but it no longer swallows you whole. Instead, it becomes a quiet undercurrent, a reminder of where you have been and what you have reclaimed. This is when the inner child begins to trust you fully. She no longer hides in the corners of your psyche. She walks beside you, curious, sometimes even joyful, and you start to notice that her presence changes the way you see the world. Colors seem richer, not because life has become perfect, but because you are no longer numb. You allow yourself to feel without fearing that feeling will destroy you. The same sensitivity that once felt like a liability now becomes a guide, warning you when something is not right, drawing you toward what nourishes you. You realize that what others once called too much is, in fact, your gift, the ability to experience life in its fullness. But living in fullness requires discernment. Not every space is worthy of your openness. Not every person can meet you in the depth you now inhabit. This is where the integration of the child and the adult becomes essential. The child's heart is wide open, eager to trust. The adult's wisdom knows that boundaries are not walls, they are gates, opened or closed by choice. Together, they create a self that is both open and protected, soft yet unshakable. This balance is the embodiment of what Jung described as the union of opposites. The more you integrate, the more you find that strength and tenderness are not at war within you. They are allies. You can say no without hardness, yes without desperation. You can walk away without hate, stay without fear. And in this state, your relationships transform, not because the people around you have changed, but because you have. Some will be drawn to this energy. They will feel the difference in you, the steadiness, the groundedness, the refusal to abandon yourself. These are the people who will meet you with respect, who will see both the woman and the child in you and honor them both. Others will fall away, unable or unwilling to engage with the version of you that no longer bends to fit their needs. This shedding is natural. It is not loss in the old sense. It is pruning, making room for what is meant to grow. The inner child's grief once kept you tethered to the past. Now it anchors you in the present. You no longer chase what cannot be caught. You no longer beg for what should be freely given. And most importantly, you no longer measure your worth by anyone's willingness to choose you. You understand now that your worth was never theirs to give. It was always yours to claim. This realization shifts everything. Decisions that once felt agonizing become simple when filtered through the truth of your inherent worth. You stop negotiating with yourself about whether your needs are valid. You stop proving your right to exist in the spaces you inhabit. And with each choice made from this place, the bond with your inner child strengthens until she is no longer just a part of you, she is you. Whole, present, seen. Yet there will still be moments when the old patterns whisper to you. They will try to pull you back into the roles you once played, into the dynamics that once defined you. This is not a sign that you are failing. It is simply the nature of memory and habit. The difference now is that you will recognize the whisper for what it is, not a command, but an echo, and you can choose not to answer. Over time, you begin to see that healing the inner child is not just personal, it is generational. The patterns that shaped you did not begin with you. They were passed down like invisible heirlooms, carried in the silences, the rules unspoken but enforced, the ways love was rationed or withheld. By confronting your own grief, you interrupt this inheritance. You become the one who ends the repetition, who refuses to hand the same wound to those who come after you. This is where the work takes on a deeper weight, because it is no longer only about reclaiming yourself. It is about shaping the future. Every time you choose truth over performance, you teach that safety is possible. Every time you hold a boundary without apology, you model that self-respect is not selfishness. Every time you allow yourself to feel without shame, you open a door for others to do the same. The healed inner child does not just transform your life, she ripples outward, altering the lives of those who touch yours. But to reach this place, you must continue to honor the grief when it stirs. Healing does not mean the ache disappears forever. It means you learn how to carry it with tenderness, how to let it speak without letting it rule you. There will be days when the old loneliness returns, when you feel the ghost of the child you once were pressing against your ribs. On those days, you do not push her away. You sit with her. You remind her that she is safe now. You let her know that her tears will not cost her your love. This constancy is what finally dissolves the fear of abandonment. The child learns over time that no matter what happens in the outer world, the woman she became will not leave her. And when that trust is complete, something remarkable happens. The need to seek approval from those who cannot give it simply fades. You do not become cold or closed, you become free. Freedom, in this sense, is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of connection that is chosen, not chased. It is the ability to walk toward people without fear of losing yourself, and to walk away without collapsing. It is the end of bargaining for love with pieces of your soul. In Jungian terms, this is the moment when the self steps into sovereignty. You are no longer a fragmented being pulled between the child's longing and the adult's compromises. You are a unified whole, capable of meeting life with both innocence and discernment. And from this wholeness, your choices carry a different weight. They are no longer made to avoid pain, but to create meaning. Meaning is the final gift of grief. When you grieve fully, you strip away the illusions and see what is real. You understand what matters, not because someone told you, but because you have felt the cost of living without it. And once you know what matters, you can shape your life around it with unwavering clarity. You may still remember the girl you never got to be, but she is no longer a ghost. She walks beside you, not as a reminder of what was lost, but as proof of what was found. You gave her a home in the only place that can never be taken from her, within yourself.